Hello everyone, my name is Patricia Jacobs. I am a teacher at Union Chapel Elementary School, and today during this Brave reporting video we're going to be talking about building strong math foundation skills for first grade. So as a little introduction, again, my name is Miss Patricia Jacobs. This is my first year teaching first grade, but I have 2 additional years as a teacher, 1 year in 3rd grade and 1 year in 10th grade. So in this presentation, I will share the focus of our mathematics curriculum in first grade and how it supports our student success in math skills. So first thing I want to address is our major grade level focus and revisions. So our major grade level focus is operations and algebraic thinking. This includes addition and subtraction within 20, also using word problems, trying to find the unknowns, the properties of operations, and fluency within 10. One of our next focuses will be number and operations in base 10. So we will be learning the place value, the tens and ones, counting to 150, and comparing 2-digit numbers, and adding and subtracting within 100. The next thing that we would mostly focus on is measurements and data. So measuring lengths with non-standard units. So for an example, that would be kids using the same size paper clips to measure a marker. So a student may say this marker is the same length as 4 paper clips. So that will be a non-standard unit. So using something else to measure another object. Also, students will be working on telling time, such as the hour and the half hour. So we would be using the clock with the hands, your shorthand that represents your hour and your longhand that represents your minutes. So students would learn that the shorthand, like I said, represents the hours. So if it's pointing at 2, students would know that that means that it is 2. And when we're talking about half hour, we're talking about either 30 minutes or a clock. So that's basically like if we say it's 2 o'clock, students would learn that the shorthand points towards the number 2 and the longhand points towards the number 12. Or if we said 2:30, the shorthand will be pointing towards the 2 and the longhand towards the 6. The next thing that students will be working with is identifying coins. More specifically, with the curriculum that we're currently using, focuses more in on students being able to identify and know the value of a penny and a dime. And lastly, they will be working on organizing data with up to 3 categories. And lastly, students will be focusing on geometry. So composing shapes, that is when students take 2 or more shapes to compose a new shape. Also, they will be working on partitioning shapes into halves or fourths, and also defining the attributes. So when we're talking about the partitioning into halves or fourths, that means that students would be able to divide these shapes into equal halves or equal fourths. And when we're talking about defining attributes, that means that we're talking about the students being able to tell us how many corners and sides that the shape has. And then just to touch on the revision. So the North Carolina standards, they emphasize on the intellectual understanding, real word problem solving, and being able to use tools and representations in math. So recent updates, which includes the unpacking documents, clarify expectations for student reasoning and fluency. So in Robeson County, they follow the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, also known as the SCOS, with resources like the pacing guides and local support. Next thing we want to address is talking about the standard of the mathematical practice implications. So the standards of mathematical practice, that would include students being able to make sense of problems and persevere. So basically, students being able to solve the problem and also being able to explain, their reasoning. Next would be the reason abstractly and quantitatively. They'll be able to conduct viable arguments and critique reasoning, model with mathematics, and use appropriate tool strategies. So implications would be students engage actively, being able to explain their thinking, using drawings, objects, and being able to create equations. And they will build problem solvers. These problem solver skills, not just, relying solely on a calculator to help them get their answers. And they will also foster perseverance, collaboration, and real-world application. So how is what they are learning going to apply into the real world for them? Next thing we want to hone in on is the domain progressions. So the main domains and key progressions would be the operations and algebraic thinking. So from students being able to solve simple adding and subtracting from kindergarten, so then they're building up to word problems with unknowns, and being able to determine that unknown within the fluency of 10 to 10 and the properties in first grade. So this builds on to larger numbers and multiplication readiness for when they are going to the second grade. Next would be numbers and operations in base 10s. So we want to make sure that our students are learning and being able to count and know their place values, more specifically the 10s and the 1s, while in first grade. That way they'll be able to move on to comparing two-digit numbers and adding within 100 with strategies. The measurements and data. So this would be non-standard measurements, again, like the example I provided earlier. Basic time and money, those same things that I provided earlier as far as, students being able to tell time, and when it comes to money, knowing what, each coin would look like and its actual value, and students being able to understand simple graphs. So geometry. So students will be able to know the shapes, attributes, and composition, and then they'll be able to move on to more complex things such as the partitioning and learning more about the actual 3D shapes. So the milestones that we want students or first graders to meet by the end of first grade is that students will be fluent in adding and subtracting within 10, using place value, able to solve real problems, and explain their thinking. So we really want students to be able to explain how they got the answer that they did. Next, we'll discuss the tools and strategies. So in first grade, we'll use different instructional tools and resources. So these things will include manipulatives, that includes base 10 blocks, 10 frames, the Unifix cubes, number lines, counters, and pattern blocks. The next thing that students would use would be, learning different strategies. So students being able to count on or count back, making tens, decomposing numbers, and being able to make drawings and make equations. These are, when we're talking about drawings, we'll be talking about like the picture on the left hand side with, it looks like little apples that have been drawn. So students would, if there was a question that said, little Timmy has 6 apples, and he gives his little sister 2 apples, how many apples does he have left? So a student could draw, those 6 apples, or use a different shape, whether it be a square or a circle, and then they could cross out how many he gave away. He gave away 2, so they would cross out 2. Then they could count how many that they have left and know that that is their answer. We would also want students to be able to create those equations. So with that example of the word problem, your equation would be 6 subtract 2 equals 4. Next, we would also be using technology and digital platforms within the classroom to help give those students additional support that helps them learn these skills. So things that we will be using is things like iExcel, Classworks, also virtual manipulatives, different math learning centers, apps, and all of these are approved by the district. Differentiation. So also, if it seems like students may be struggling more, we would be working with students in small groups, having hands-on centers, having more visual supports for those students who might be struggling a little more, and being able to provide extensions for students that maybe are more advanced learners. And again, all of this would be, falling in line with Robeson County with their pacing guide and resources that are provided to us. So to summarize everything, and some of the key takeaways is, just understanding that strong foundations and number census operations and measurements and geometry is what our main focus in first grade is. We want to emphasize on practices that develop critical thinkers and problem solvers. And we also want to develop a partnership, with the home, the parents, the caretakers, with the school, and us teachers. That way that students can, have the most success. And just a little reflection, math is everywhere. So by working together, we can ensure that every first grader in Robeson County gains the confidence and skills needed for these, for them to have a lifelong success. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You could, visit me on my teacher website, attend math night and open house, or contact me via email or phone with any questions that you may have. So I hope this video was more helpful in giving insight on what our first graders will be doing throughout the year. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.